Okay, we're good.
Call this town hall meeting of North Huron to order. Confirmation of the agenda that the Council Township of North Huron accept the agenda for June 1st, 2020 council meeting as presented. Do I have a mover? I have Paul. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Rick seconds it. I'm going to hand it over to you, Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron accept the agenda for the June 1st, 2020 council meeting as presented. So Deputy Reeve-Sype.
Yes.
Councillor Falconer.
Yes.
Councillor Heffer.
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson. Oh, sorry, Councillor Van Hitterson's absent right now. So Councillor Palmer.
Yes.
Councillor McBurney.
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that vote carries 6-0.
Thank you. Number 3 is disclosure of pecuniary interest. Please speak up if anybody has any. Not hearing any. We're going to go to number 4. Number 4 is public comments. This is an opportunity for any member of public to speak on an item of business that is on the agenda. And there's a 2-minute time limit per person. Is there anybody out there that would like to speak up? Not hearing any. We're going to go to the consent agenda. The consent is that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent items 5.1.1 and further that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives consent items 5.1.2 to 5.3.1 for information. Do I have a mover?
I'll move that.
I have Rick and I have Kevin seconding. Would somebody or anybody like to speak to anything on that before we call the vote? Paul, go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, through you, Reeve. I'm just curious on check number in 5.2.1, check number 505390 is $749.64 to Donnelly Murphy for the Lions Club. I'm just curious about that.
Have Donna address that. Thanks.
Yeah, so that would be, Dwayne can follow up if I don't have all the information, but that would be in regard to the transfer of that property down in Blythe to the Lions Club that was discussed a few months ago. The property on the main street in Blythe.
Yes, I understand that, but I thought there were not going to be any costs incurred to the North Huron with any of that part. Just question on that.
I'm going to hand that over to Dwayne for a follow-up.
Yeah, that's correct. So what happens then is we pay the invoice and then we do a recoverable to the Lions Club.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else would like to speak to anything? Speak up because I can't see all the fingers at once. Maybe just as well. Okay, Carson, I'm going to hand it over to you for a recorded vote.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent item 5.1.1 and further that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives consent items 5.1.2 to 5.3.1 for information. So Councillor Falconer. Councillor Falconer, sorry.
Yes.
Councillor Heffer.
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson. Oh, and she's still not in here. So Councillor Palmer.
Yes.
Councillor McBurney.
Yes.
Deputy Reeve-Sype.
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey. So that vote carries 6-0.
We have no public meetings today for 6, so we're going to go right to number 7, 7.1, the clerk's department. And I'm going to ask for a mover and seconder on that, and then we'll speak to it. Do I have a mover?
Your Worship. So this one, before you get a mover and a seconder, this one might be better off if Monica does her presentation first.
Oh, Monica. Go for it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reeve, and good evening once again to Council. I'm here to present on a application for a surplus farm residence severance. And as council knows, when the county receives an application for severance, then we bring a full report to the local council for your comments in advance of this being decided on at the county level. So bringing a report right now for your comments, but I'll give you an overview of what's been applied for and what the planning department's recommendation is. So this is consent application C30 for the year 2020. And thank you for moving to that slide. The applicant is Snell Farms, Inc. That's the owner of the property. And Marvin Snell is a member of Snell Farms, Inc. And he's able to act on behalf of that corporation. And he is the applicant on behalf of Snell Farms, Inc. The location of the property in question is 84251 Hoover Line. And that is legal description of that would be Lot 30, Concession 5, East Wawanosh. And it is all of Lot 30, Concession 5, East Wawanosh. So it's a 200-acre farm. Next slide. So as I mentioned, this is an application for the severance of a dwelling that's surplus to the needs of the farming operation. The area that's proposed to be severed is just under 3 acres in area. And the area to be retained is just under 200 acres in area. 197.3 acres would be the retained land. The property is designated agriculture in the North Huron official plan. There's a small amount of forest on the property that's designated natural environment limited protection. And the zoning of the subject property would be AG1, general agriculture for the farmland, and NE2, natural environment limited protection for the small forested area at the northwest corner of the property. Next slide. So on this slide, you can just see a large photo of the property. It's on the corner of Westfield Road and Hoover Line. You can see the bush at the northwest corner of the property that I mentioned, and you can just barely make out the location of the farm buildings. So the next slide will show you a little bit better what's being proposed in terms of the severance. So this is a drawing of the farm, but it's not drawn to scale. You can see the proposed severed lands contain a house and a large barn. There's 2 sheds on this drawing, but the applicant has advised me that one of those sheds has now been taken down. So on the severed property, there would be a house, a large storage shed, and a large barn that's used for storage. Next slide, please. So in this air photo, you can see a bit better the what is being proposed for the severed property. As you can see, it's a slightly irregular shaped lot. The reason for the irregular shape, there's 2 reasons. Number one, the applicant wanted to hug as close as possible to the edge of the existing farmstead and save as much workable land as possible. So as you can see, the severed property bumps out around the existing barn. But at the south property line, you can see that the proposed severance line starts probably about 5 or 10 meters out from, maybe more, out from the existing grassed area. And that's because there's an existing septic system with its weeping beds that actually extend out a little bit out into that field. So they're proposing to move the severed property line a little bit further south to clear the edge of the weeping tile and give the minimum setback distance from the edge of the weeping tile that's required by the regulations. So that's the shape of the proposed severed property. And as you can see, that works out to just under 3 acres in area. Next slide.
That's all I have for slides, Monica.
That's okay. So just before I wrap up, I just wanted to comment on the policy review. So as I mentioned, there's been no objections to this severance so far, and the application is in conformity with the North Huron official plan. So at this time, it's proceeding as an undisputed consent. In reviewing an application for surplus farm dwelling, some of the things that we have to consider is the house surplus to a farming operation? And Snell Farms Inc. does own another farm with a house on it. We also consider the age of the house, the amount of farmland that's attached to the house, and the requirement for the retained lands to be rezoned to no longer permit a residence. One of the things I wanted to note is that the Huron County official plan, the North Huron official plan, and the provincial policy statement all require that the retained lands be rezoned to no longer permit a residence. But since this is a large property, it's a 200-acre farm, it would be the planning department's recommendation that only the north half of Lot 30 Concession 5 be rezoned to AG2, and the south half of Lot 30 Concession 5 remain zoned AG1. So if there ever was a new owner of those farmlands that wanted to build a house on the south 100 acres, they would still be able to do that. And that's typically how the planning department will recommend that condition when the farm is larger than 200 acres or larger. The other comments I'd make is that we received comments from the building official. The building official has requested that Section 65 of the Drainage Act be met. That just means that the assessment of drainage assessment between the severed and the retained lands has to be split appropriately. Also, a new access is proposed for the field access to the retained lands. So an entrance permit for that field access has been recommended as a condition. Other than that, the other conditions are the standard conditions that we always recommend. Oh, actually, there's one other that isn't standard. I'm recommending that a steel grain bin and the cement pad on the severed property be removed to the satisfaction of the township. The reason for this recommendation is that the township and the county, we have in the past had issues where large barns that are unoccupied at the time of a surplus severance, but are still capable of holding livestock, that a new owner has come along and put livestock in a large barn. So what we try to do is recommend conditions to ensure good faith on the part of the farmer that they're going to make it so that that barn is no longer capable of being used for large numbers of livestock. So in this case, I talked to the owner and he agreed that the steel grain bin that's existing on the property could be removed. He said that it would be his preference not to have to remove it, but that if council recommended that he would do that. Other than that, the building is, barn is over 100 years old and doesn't have the infrastructure. There is a concrete silo on there, but that concrete silo isn't usable. So this is our recommendation in order to help demonstrate that the barn will no longer be used for livestock. So with that would be my recommendations to council, that North Huron Council recommend this application for severance to be approved with the conditions that I have recommended.
Thank you, Monica. Because there's so many conditions on this one, I'm wondering if we should have a conversation before I even ask for a mover and seconder for this. So I'd like to hear from council first, and that's rare for me because I prefer to have a motion on the floor, but I got a feeling I want to hear from East Wawanach how they feel about this. That's possible. So would somebody like to speak to this, or are we fine with this? Go ahead, Kevin, you can start.
Yeah, I'm just curious, the one slide that showed the property across the street, it looked like it had already been severed. Is that
Monica, do you have an answer for that?
Actually, I didn't notice that myself, but if Carson doesn't mind bringing up my presentation, we might be able to see that slide.
Or, like the keyhole signature of one that's been severed.
Right.
I'm just curious.
I believe it is severed.
It's severed. Yeah. So we're yeah, there. Now, if you look at that one, that's got the lot line around the neighboring property. So
yeah, I can see that now.
So it's nothing new to that that road. So I'm just curious whether that argument
you very much, Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Reeve, to Monica. The aerial, the drawing, the freehand drawing, bordered in blue, they're not the same. So I'm just curious. He has it jutted out in the air in the hand drawn to accommodate the septic, and in the blue version, it goes right to the road. So which one is correct?
So after the applicant submitted that drawing and got his application started, he had some second thoughts about how he wanted to have the shape of the lot. So the property line comes straight up from the street, as you pointed out in the blue drawing, and it comes out far enough to clear the edge of the septic system. And then it jogs back in once it's cleared the septic system. The reason why he changed it is he realized that with the farm equipment that is likely to be used on this property, it's not convenient to come in at the east side of the property and then swoop out again to come around the septic system and come back in. So he was trying to keep it for the least number of turns for the farm equipment. So the second drawing is what he's amended his application to request.
Makes sense.
Anyone else? Okay, not hearing. I'm going to turn it over to, I'm going to ask for a mover and seconder for 7.1.1 consent application Snell. Do I have a mover? Christopher?
Anita will move.
Seconds.
I'll second it.
We have two in there, Carson. You caught them, and I'm going to swing it over to you.
Through your worship. So I got Councillor Palmer as the mover, but who did you have as a seconder?
I think Paul's hand went up second, actually.
Okay, and I just to point out too, in case the rest of council's not aware, Councillor Van Hittersum is on the line now through a call-in. She's able to get in that way. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby recommend approval of the consent application file number 3020, owner applicant Snell Farms Inc. / Marvin Snell, property description lot 30, concession 5, East Wawanosh Ward, Township of North Huron, with the conditions set out in the Huron County Planning and Development Report presented by Monica Walker Bolton at the June 1st, 2020 council meeting. So Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum?
Yes.
Councillor Palmer?
Yes.
Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Syke?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that vote carries 7-0.
Thank you. We have no financial report tonight. We have no rec report tonight. Public Works 7.4.1 is the application here, the PW application. I'm going to switch gears here. Sean, would you please speak to this first before we do a recorded vote?
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you very much. So as Council's aware, staff's been working towards the development of long-term capital plans for on a number of fronts. Through the Master Servicing Plan program, we were able to put together a prioritized full infrastructure replacement plan that we're already seeing in effect. As you can see, Carling Terrace is well underway. That particular long-term plan looks at complete infrastructure replacement. That's everything from the roads, sanitary, water, and storm. One of the next steps that we've been looking at is a capital plan that would address specifically road replacement. Because as we're all aware, the cost for full infrastructure replacement is staggering these days. So what we would like to do is get that long-term capital planning for just the road surfaces. We know what the infrastructure is like underneath, and once we get that data, we can come up with basically a program that would give the municipality some momentum moving forward. For years where we're not doing full infrastructure, we have a prioritized list that we could look to just for asphalt.
Anita Van Hittersum has left the meeting.
So that's what we've been working on. Now, road needs assessments have traditionally been completed through the use of technicians. They get in a truck, they drive the roads, they assess the ride comfort, they assess they assess the distress levels of the road, and because you're using different individuals with different vehicles, these reports can vary from year to year, and we've seen that with our own reports, and this is typical of them. So what we've done this time around is we're looking to technology to see if we can minimize inconsistencies. And in dealing with LAS through AMO, we came across Street Scan. Now, these guys use technology. They have a fully kitted vehicle that goes up and down the roads and basically uses a number of different technologies to assess the road condition itself. This is something that we had talked about in the budget process, and there were funds that were included in the operating budget, but of course they were contingent on the idea that we were aware that there was a grant coming through FCM. The project we're proposing would be basically the assessment of all the paved infrastructure that we have in the urban centers. We're looking at about 47 centerline kilometers of road, as well as about 33 kilometers of sidewalk. And what we're recommending in this report is that we go with Street Scan to do this automated collection. As I mentioned, they use optical 3D cameras and other technology to look at the distresses on the road to assess ride comfort and basically come up with a very consistent and repeatable data collection. Once they collect the data, they would be able to generate a pavement condition index, which we could use in the development of this long-term plan. As I mentioned, the FCM has come up with the Municipal Asset Management Program. It's a five-year, $50 million program that's funded through Infrastructure Canada to support Canadian municipalities. The beauty of the program is it's 80% funding. So when we talk to Street Scan, the estimated full cost for the sidewalk and roadway assessment was $18,076, less the 80% back through the funding program, which amounted to $14,461. The net cost to the municipality to do this entire project would be $3,615. And we have $10,000 in the 2020 operating budget. And that's really it.
Thank you very much, Sean. I'm going to ask for a mover and seconder, and then we can have a conversation. I have Paul moving.
Trevor seconds.
Trevor seconds. Okay, who would like to, does anybody have any questions for this? Go ahead,
Chris,
Yep, go ahead, Chris.
through you, Reeve. Sean, I was, when I started reading this, I was a little concerned about what the cost would be, and then you get down to the estimated cost, and it's for all that they do,
yeah,
it's quite reasonable. I'm impressed by that.
Thank you, through your worship. Yeah, that was one of the things that appealed. It looks like they generate a good solid report, and because of the 80% funding, it is really affordable.
Is there a recommendation as this should be done every 5 years, 10 years? We develop a baseline with this now, and then how do we move forward with this information?
Through you, your worship, we have been doing it traditionally every, I believe Donna can speak more to this, but I think we did it in 2016, and before that, I'm not sure, to be honest. I think it was either 2010 or 2012, somewhere in that neighborhood. But it is something that we do over and over again just to monitor and manage. Again, that comes back, though, to the whole desire to find a system that was repeatable. Because if we do it this year, 2020, 4 or 5 years from now, if you get a different firm and a different technician to do it, you could get a completely different assessment. If you go to the technologically based system, I think that it should be very repeatable.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this?
Reed Bailey.
Go ahead, Trevor.
I just wanted to reiterate that this is in coordination with the roads needs studies that we're already had. So the roads needs studies tells us one thing. These roads analysis will tell us something different. That will help. I guess the intention I'm getting is these are supportive documentations to the roads needs study that we've already had. Is that correct, Sean?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, I think this will build upon the road needs study, because it's important to note that we used the roads needs study to develop that long-term capital plan. I'm expecting for the better part, this will underscore that roads study and the findings there.
Thank you very much, Sean. Anyone else like to ask Sean some questions? Not hearing any. I believe I have a mover and a seconder, so I'm going to hand it over to Carson for a recorded vote.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of hereby receive the report of the Director of Public Works dated June 1st, 2020 regarding an application to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for information, and further that the Council directs staff to apply for a grant opportunity from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program to advance our road assessment management program, and further that if successful in securing funding through the MAMP program, that streets can be utilized to complete road and sidewalk assessments in the town of Wingham and village of Blythe with an upset limit of $10,000 for the municipal portion being drawn from the 2020 operating budget. So this will be a recorded vote. So Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
Councillor Van Hittersum?
Yes.
Councillor Palmer? Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight?
Yes.
Councillor Falconer? Councillor Falconer? It appears he might have lost his connection. We'll treat that as if he's absent from the vote. And so Reeve Bailey?
Yes.
So that vote carries 6-0 with Councillor Falconer being absent.
Okay, I'm going to move on to 7.4.2. We'll come back in a minute. This is the town hall front counter accessibility and COVID-19 renovation. John, I'm going to get you to speak to this one too. Then I'm going to take a mover and a seconder. Then we'll talk to it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen? John.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. This will be a little bit more heavy lifting, I think. So I'll go fairly slow through it for my own benefit. At the February 20th, 2020 budget meeting, Council received a joint report regarding the allocation of modernization funds that were received from the province of Ontario. As part of that report, Council approved the allocation of $50,000 of the modernization funds for town hall accessibility renovations and office space investigations. In particular, one of the primary purposes of these funds was to address the issues at the town hall front counter, as that counter does not currently meet AODA accessibility requirements for service. Additionally, as the province of Ontario continued to carry out their staged approach to opening in the COVID-19 environment, North Huron's department heads have started to develop COVID-19 operational recovery plans. As part of this process, we identified that the town hall front counter and public service area is it was assessed as the significant risk at the town hall facility with regard to COVID-19. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's approval on the construction of a front counter public service corridor that would address both the accessibility concerns within the building as well as COVID-19 concerns at Town Hall. Through this approach, North Huron would be able to use the funds already incorporated into the 2020 budget to address the unexpected COVID-19 related expenditures instead of requiring any new money for this particular problem. So as part of the operation or the development of the operational recovery plan for Town Hall, we looked at the building. We looked at as many options as we could come up with to see if we could address not only the accessibility concerns, but figure out how to deal with COVID, or how to operate in a post-COVID-19 environment. After investigation, staff determined that really there was only two options that we could come up with that could be employed to aid in the reduction of risk of the spread of COVID-19, not only to North Huron staff, but to the general public as well that were using the facility. Option one involves the construction of a permanent service corridor across the front of the building, the front inside of the building, and isolates the general public from the majority of the town hall facility. So basically, they would come in the one door, they would walk into the open corridor, step up to the kiosk that suited their purposes. One kiosk would be higher than the other, and this would meet AODA requirements. They would do their business with town hall staff, and then they would continue in the same direction and leave the other door. Option two basically was us looking at the existing kiosk, saying, okay, well, we know we have to make some changes to make it wheelchair accessible, and maybe more palatable for people that wouldn't necessarily want to stand while they were tending to business with Town Hall. But we would use the existing infrastructure. The concern there is that we would put them into Town Hall. They would do their business at the Town Hall business at the kiosk, continue down the corridor, and then take the left, go through the hallway, past the existing washrooms, out to the south entrance, and leave there. So even though we still have the one-way pattern, we basically would have the general public spending a lot more time in the building. The concern was that this would a heightened risk for the spread of COVID-19 should an additional outbreak take place. Now, basically, having looked at that and having talked to a number of individuals, our recommendation, of course, is to create the corridor. It is a little bit more expensive option, but we believe it to be a permanent option that minimizes risk to all parties. It is important to note that in either of these proposed options, what was formerly referred to as the public washrooms be basically designated for use by the theater only, and that they would be closed to the general public. We've identified them as an area of highest risk, and it's recommended that they wouldn't be used as just public washrooms. There is no municipal or building code requirement to have a set of public washrooms at Town Hall. The one thing that we did note was that the municipality may find that there is an extremely limited amount of control that we have over the timeline for reopening. Should the province find themselves in a position to lift the emergency orders, there'll be an intense amount of pressure on the municipality to open the building as soon as possible. And so in the meantime, what we're doing, we're waiting on direction from council, but at the same time, we're trying to figure out what our other options are for short-term service use. You know, if the emergency orders are kept in place for a while and we're given instruction to go ahead, we may be able to get construction out of the way, but we anticipate that this is a 6-week build. Okay. And again, stressing that time is of the essence, I did want to point out that if this work is approved, we were really leaning on previous procurement processes. We have a contractor that's done work in the last year for the municipality. Some of the work that he's been doing for us was through a proper procurement process, and he was found to be not only was he cheapest, but now he's familiar with the building. So we would recommend that we just continue down that course. As far as finances go, option one is certainly the more expensive. We're looking at a construction estimate somewhere in the neighborhood of $28,800. 20,000 of that is for the building or for the construction itself. There's $2,000 required to move a fire control panel. Nelson Dolly Engineering was able to help us out with this, and if we go ahead with it, we're looking at about $3,000 for the design to make sure that we meet all fire code, meet architectural requirements. All the I's would be dotted and T's would be crossed from a building perspective. And of course, that 28,000 includes about 3,700 or 15% contingency, because it is an extremely old building and there's going to be surprises when we punch through walls. Option 2, again, much cheaper. That's basically the option that has us changing the existing kiosk to have a lower section. We still would be using the building as a whole, and we're looking at about $5,250 for that approach. So, and then aside from that, the overall functionality concerns associated with the town hall facility have been discussed by staff and council for some time. We've all had these conversations. These concerns have been exacerbated by the global pandemic, and as such, we have commissioned an engineer to review the existing floor plan. And the purpose for that is it's not a whole lot of money, and what it'll do is give us a detailed floor plan that will allow both staff and certainly council to look at all of their options as we move forward. Okay, and aside from that, the actions outlined in the report contribute to the completion of action item 3.2, implement Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act requirements and Ontario's with Disabilities Act requirements. It is noted in the strategic plan that the outcome of this action item is to ensure accessibility compliance is met for municipal facilities and operations. Now, in terms of accessibility, the only other, and I didn't, for future considerations, we have the elevator, which gives us full accessibility to the building right now. That route doesn't tie nicely into the one-way corridor that we're proposing, and for that reason, we say as a future consideration, we would recommend in following years that an appropriately sloped ramp be fitted to the front of the building, or actually to the side of the building. We did some preliminary looks on that, and there is adequate space to get the appropriate, I believe the slope is 12:1. So there is room to put the ramp as we move forward.
Thank you, Sean. I'm going to ask for a mover and seconder before we have a conversation. So if there's anybody who would like to move this, I have Anita and I have Paul seconding. Now I'm going to open it up for conversation. Who would like to speak to this? Anita, go ahead.
I would like to know if the administrative staff can do without the room they have to give up for the new corridor. And how often is the elevator used right now? Because you're closing everything off and just a little bit stays open if I look at the first plan.
Yeah. Yes, through your worship. That is a very good point, Councillor. We're looking at a corridor that's approximately 8 foot in width. So really, and that's been a point of discussion for staff. We have two options. Right now, we have 4 staff members working in the front office. One of them, though, is really accounts receivable, accounts payable. One option is to have her relocated back to the treasury area, which would, of course, you've reduced your staff complement up there by 25%, gives you a little bit more working space. Failing that, we would have to look at the size of the workstations. Maybe we either go to smaller workstations, or the bench could be utilized as a workstation, or the front counter is utilized as a workstation. In my past functions, I was familiar with that type of an approach, where the person who was tending the front counter actually sat at the front counter, did their other work while they're waiting for customers, in the slow times. As far as the second question, the elevator is very infrequently used. I can attest to that, because anytime you uses it, she gets to listen to all the mechanical noise as the elevator's operating right beside her office. It doesn't get a whole lot of use at all.
Thank you. Chris,
you.
did you have your hand up? Paul? And Chris.
Yes, through you, Rave. Sean, how wide is that hallway as you're going into the town hall?
Oh, through your worship, are you referring to the existing hallway?
Yes, if we're going straight in, as if we're going back to the council chambers. Like it, to me, on that picture, it looks like it's, what, 4 feet wider almost?
That picture is not to scale by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh, okay.
No. So I apologize for that. So I would say that hall is probably between 8 and 10 feet. Somebody can step in and stop me if I'm wrong on that. But the corridor that we're proposing is 8 foot, and we came up with that because that would allow somebody to be standing at the kiosk doing their business. Another person could actually be directly behind them against the wall, and then you still have that 6 foot of social distancing that would be required. But no, I'm sorry, those drawings are not by any stretch to scale.
No problem. Another question, Sean. Still though, a person coming in a wheelchair or going up that ramp that you're suggesting, they still have to go into the oncoming traffic though, right? Your picture on option 1 there, they still would have to walk into the traffic. It's not a continuation, right?
Through you, your worship, you're absolutely correct. Regardless of what direction we put it, 50% of the time they're going to be going against traffic. There's, without going into the extreme of putting accessibility ramps on both sides, it's unavoidable. We would have to reverse direction at some point.
Okay.
Chris, go ahead.
I'm just saying, I just like it where we just have that's a rampway. I take it that you're talking, not an elevator to the north front there. That
Correct.
will be a ramp, not an elevator.
That's correct. Through your worship, the cost of a ramp would be a fraction of even the simplest limited use, limited access elevator.
I'm going to let Chris get in here in a second. I just want to confirm that's an outside ramp, not an inside ramp. Thank you. Okay, Chris, your turn.
Yeah, I like option 1. Through you, Reeve, Sean, and everybody. I like option 1. I like the flow. I like the simplicity. But we do need to remember that this building belongs to the taxpayers. So we need to make it as friendly. It has to have that air about it. The way it is now, it's okay. It's always been that way. But this is better. This is excellent. And regarding the washrooms, are they used now by folks? Is it a commonality?
Through your worship, so by location of my office, I can kind of speak to how frequently the washrooms are used, and quite frankly, the numbers have declined from previous years for sure. We get a handful of people maybe a week, and of course, right now, no one's using them, right, because the facility's closed. So we haven't received any concerns about that as well. The other thing I guess to note is they're not standard public washrooms. They're only open from 8:30 to 4:30 Monday to Friday. So people find other accommodations regardless, I guess.
Okay, fine.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Through you, Reeve. Washrooms are also accessed by the theater group, are they not?
Yes, through your worship, that was the intent, was that those washrooms, I mean, the theater group did a fantastic job fixing them up. And the idea is that they would remain in service for the purpose of the theater when that type of function resumes.
Yeah, I just can't My own opinion is, not having to reinvent the wheel when we got the fully accessible elevator for accessibility already on premise. Doesn't require adding another ramp outside in the winter and maintenance in the wintertime of clearing the snow off and then so it's not slippery. And having it accessed to the accessible washrooms for anyone that was coming into the building to use. My own opinion, why reinvent the wheel when we already have accessibility and it's fully covered and it's up to code now.
Through your worship, that's a fair statement. This was just, we were looking at as a future consideration if council determined that use of the elevator presented problems. We don't know what the future is going to hold in the era that we now exist. So we were just trying to say that there are other options for future consideration should you decide that the elevator isn't practical or isn't preferred. So we were trying to make sure we put everything in front of council for consideration.
Anyone else speak up? I can't see everybody.
Reed Bailey.
Trevor, go ahead.
I think, in my opinion, like option one, it really talks about the flow of individuals coming into there and really for the business that they need to be in. There, in my mind, during 8 to 4, really does any individual need to be, in essence, do they need to be all the way in the building to do their business? And my suggestion is no, they really don't need to be. So the flow of this traffic really separates the ratepayers from the administration as a whole, and therefore, it costs a little bit more. It also gives us an opportunity, like Sean has mentioned, is to look at value for, an elevator is a very expensive piece of equipment. And, if that elevator were to ever need to be decommissioned, the replacement is significant. And really is the discussion about an elevator really the discussion about accessibility, or a ramp is just as accessible? Because I would argue somebody who's using the elevator today has to call town hall and has to get them to acknowledge that they're going to use it in order for somebody to come and help them. So it's not really convenient for a taxpayer to come to town hall because of that elevator. So, in my mind, this is step one. Option one is step one of an overall plan that, me and the Reeve have talked about. What does this building look like in 5 years, in 10 years, from a staffing perspective? Because, we've heard, as council has heard, the space for staff is limited. And, council chambers takes up a lot of real estate for not a lot of time that's spent there. And maybe there's other options that we have within the municipality owned buildings that we could use. So I think ultimately, option one gives us the best option right now. Doesn't help with traffic going back and forth, and it stays it out of the administration's say hair, because obviously if they're going to see the clerk or whatever, you're going to have coordination between individuals and the public, and maybe that's not the greatest idea in this COVID-19 situation.
Thank you, Trevor. I'm going to hand it over to Kevin.
Yeah, thank you. Through your in that instance, and Trevor, the ownership and the maintenance and the cost associated with the elevator then would be put onto the theater company, because it is totally inaccessible upstairs without that elevator. And without the elevator and the accessible washrooms. That's something that the theater company is going to have to install themselves.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm going to touch on that, Trevor. I know you want to speak to it, but I'm going to touch on that for a second. Yeah, I think it's about $5,000 a year to have that maintained. We have given this some discussion. We've all given this a lot of thought. And I want to thank the staff for stepping forward with stepping forward. We have a situation that's unlike any you're ever going to see again, we hope. I don't think COVID's going away, guys. And I think it might slow down for a while, then it's going to pick up, and maybe 5 or 6 years from now, it's going to. I see this as a good first step where we're going to get tracking in and out. I think we need to develop it a little further, though. I think we need to develop, and this could be phase 2 if you want to pass this tonight. And I'm not talking 5 years from now either. I'm talking 6 months from now. I see this as a good first step. But I'm in agreement with Deputy Reeve Sipes. I think it is, when we look at where the staff is, the crowded conditions and COVID-19, and please stay 6 feet away, and now you've got the public running through the hall and kind of everybody's pushing each other's shoulders. I got to be honest with you guys. We use that town hall where we sit as a chamber 6 hours a month. It's ridiculous. And then if we do have someone, we're going in there, quite often I'll be in there in a meeting, there'll be one person and myself sitting in that great big room talking. I feel we'd be further ahead to take a second step and look at the chambers as wasted space. Think about the elevator right there. Think about the public washrooms. Think this all, and I'm going to give this back to the staff. This is not going to be a council. I think for the safety of our staff and everybody involved, we should be looking at that useless waste, and we could maybe have our meetings over at the library for 6 hours a month. We own the building anyway, and there's a nice big meeting place there, or some other place. That's kind of where I'm going with this. And this COVID isn't going away. But more importantly, we're a community of communities. And we have Mennonites that don't put the phone, don't pay through the bank. They come into that office and they use it on a regular basis, as well as elderly people that like to just get out for a ride. So I'm thinking in the back of my mind that this is a good first step. We have to do something. We have to make our staff safe. We did do it with one person up at the front end. Now you've just got 3 there, simply because of the COVID-19, 16. One of those numbers. So I think this is a good thing. You've got a mover and you've got a seconder, but I would prefer if the staff would take it one step further. We have, forget how much money sitting aside that Premier Ford gave us 2 years ago. We started with $500,000. So we're not going to be burdening the taxpayers. That's what that money was meant when he gave us. And you heard me say, I don't want it to go to trucks. I don't want it to go to equipment. But these are buildings that hold their value, and these are staff that are totally valuable to us. I just wanted to put that out there. Would anybody else like to speak further? Go ahead, Trevor.
I think in Sean's report, I think he did mention that there was going to be further discussion with an engineering firm about the overall layout of the town hall. So I think that is going to come back. I think ultimately, in the end of the day, Kevin's made a good point about the elevator and what that means. I think we have to be careful, though, that those washrooms that they are considered to be public, they're not overall accessible. They're not completely accessible, which we consider to be an accessible washroom. So I think there's definitely going to be some discussion about that anyway at some point down the road. I think that layout of town hall, that discussion needs to come to the table and come to the head, because council has already talked about potential demolishment of the Armories building and what that land might be used for. And there's a whole bunch of scenarios. So I think ultimately when those decisions come to council can make a full-on decision based on all the arrangements that they have, all the information they can have, so that they can make a valuable decision based on the overall infrastructure that they need to keep.
Appreciate that, Trevor. Yeah, I think we all have that understanding that things have changed and they're not going to go back to what we used to call the normal.
Your worship, may I say something?
It's not going to go back for a while. Whoever that was, yes, you can.
It was Vicky.
Oh, Vicky.
Yeah, it's okay. I just wanted to comment on something, a concern. The theater group does not pay toward the operation of the facility. The township covers the cost of the operation of that building, and the revenue that's generated through the rentals goes toward operational costs for the town. It's all lumped in kind of under the town hall at this point. So whether it's reported under the cost of it is under administration or it's created under a theater budget, it doesn't affect the theater group at all because the township is the one who's paying for the operation.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, hearing
Yes,
none. I hear someone.
yes, Bernie, it's Paul.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, Bernie, yeah, I understand now. I just want to make sure it wasn't going to be another elevator going in on the north side of the building. Now it's a ramp, perfect. They can't break down. So I'm looking at it differently now. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, I do believe I have a mover and a seconder. I'm not hearing anyone else, so I'm going to hand it over to Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the joint report of the clerk and the Director of Public Works dated June 1st, 2020 regarding the Town Hall front counter accessibility and COVID-19 renovations for information purposes. And further, that Council authorizes the construction of the Town Hall front counter public service aisle with an AODA compliant accessible kiosk funded through the Town Hall accessibility renovations / office space investigations funds as set out in the 2020 budget. And further, that Council agrees that the Town Hall washrooms remain closed to the public other than for events held in the Town Hall Theater. So this will be a recorded vote. So Councillor Palmer?
Yes.
Councillor McBurney?
Yes.
Deputy Reeve Sight?
Yes.
Councillor Falconer?
Yes.
Councillor Heffer?
Yes.
Councillor Van Hitterson?
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
So that vote carries 7-0.
Thank you very kindly, everyone. So we have no fire report, no building report, no child care department report, and the CAO does not have a report. We have no correspondence tonight. Council reports, Reeves activity report. Just going to touch on a few things. Well, this mess we're in is carrying on, and I think staff and all of us are starting to realize this is not short term. This is another month. I think a year from now, we're still going to be fighting it. Not to say that we won't win it one day. I truly believe we will. I just think it's going to be a long term. So I want council to know that the business of the township is still carrying on. The staff has been doing a lot of work. We still have the 4 new developments going on. There's one in Blythe. That's actually 2 in Blythe. There's the one at the old school and the one at the north end. We have the Hutton Heights. We're still doing the studies on that. We did not stop with that one, and that's in East Huron. And then, of course, we've got the Maitland Estates, the 400 house development in Wingham here. And we've been working on that too. And I've been in touch with different people that are players in that. And we're moving forward with that. At the county level, as you know, as you're all aware, that I've been pushing to have the county building moved to the edge of Blythe. And I'm sure a few of you read the write-ups about it and are sure aware of what I've been trying to do, definitely aware of what I've been trying to do. It's an interesting situation because 2 years ago when I first got this job, in one of the first meetings at county, they were talking about putting a new building in Godrich. And I put my hand up and I said, shouldn't it be in central Huron somewhere? Shouldn't it be in the middle of Huron? 2 years later, we were having this debate for those that didn't realize at the last county meeting. And Mayor Klopp from Blue Water put his hand up and said, well, the county's spending a lot of time. We're having a lot of debates, but nobody ever said to go ahead and put the building up to begin with. So it's on hold. Apparently, everything I seen about going in Godrich and the gazillion dollars was never okayed by the previous council. So we're kind of back to 1A square after 2 years. So we will have a vote on that and see if, first of all, if the council wants to start to have one anyway. I thought that was a rather interesting trip for myself. As I said, the staff is also meeting and working through, as you've realized tonight, about COVID-19 and how we're going to open up and how we're going to move forward. We are following provincial legislation. We're not going to step out of line. If there are certain items that are not open, you can assure that your residents that you represent that it's not because we're not opening it, it's because we're waiting for provincial authorization to do it. Having said that, behind the scenes, all the directors have been authorized or asked to, if you want to, asked to start to get ready. Not to say we're going to be opening up in 2 weeks or a week, but we're going to, that the staff is starting to say it's coming down the road, so let's start to get ready for it. The daycare, I know, Val, you've been working very hard, especially, and you and Vicky, because you have so much in it. I shall not babble on anymore. Thank you for listening. Council reports, verbal or written updates from members that sit on boards or committees, which there are not too many of those meetings going on. So, okay. Comments by members. Is there any comments with what's going on out in our communities and in our province, or just your local stuff that you'd like to talk about? Kevin, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you, Reeve. Through you, Reeve. My comment is, it might be able to answer by Sean. I've had a few inquiries in the town of Blythe that the some of the private properties that were accessed for the power and water and such for the triplexes or fourplexes at the old school. There, one section of that now is getting landscaped and paved driveways and beautifications done to them because the people are moving in. But the properties that were accessed across the street still have their driveways cut out and dug up, and their front lawns have never been put back into usable condition. And some have, had their some of the front flower gardens cut up in that point, just on the south side. But I was just curious that I'm getting some comments about, the new places are getting their new driveways and everything all look prettied up with new sod and soil and carry on. But the access points from the people that were living there prior to that haven't had anything done since the holes were dug to access the services. I was just curious if there was any timeline or who was responsible for the rehabilitation of those properties, and also the roadway as well. The roadways were pavement was all dug up, and it's still just gravel and some potholes. So I just wanted to relay that to some of the stakeholders.
I didn't know if you wanted to give him a brief answer, or you're just going to look into that and come back another time.
Through you, Your Worship, we'll relay that to the contractor tomorrow, and I'll see if I can get some information for you.
Yeah. And could you pop us all an email when you get any bit of information on that? Because I'm sure Kevin will continue to be bugged as well as Rick over there, and I do understand why.
Would be happy to.
All councillors will know and can comment on that if asked.
Absolutely, Your Worship.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Reeve Bailey.
I've got Trevor, and then I've got Paul.
I was just going to ask, I know Fire Chief Bedard had asked a while back about training for the fire service. Is that a discussion that we're really just waiting for the orders to be lifted? Is that really what the thoughts of council and your Marty? Is that really the thoughts?
Marty, I'm going to get you to talk to that one if you don't mind.
Yeah, so we are getting some information through our Fire Chiefs Association on that particular topic. Our officers actually are meeting right now to make a plan. I think we're going to be gearing up towards the middle of June, and we have been doing the online training, but we're going to start back with the in-person practicing and training. We're just going to do it in smaller numbers as per the guidelines from the Fire Chiefs Association.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yes, through you, Reeve. I just want to thank the BIA for the flower boxes that they put on the main street. It sure helps lighten up the main street a bit. Thank you.
I'll touch on that one because I have. So the arrangements we've made is because we have so much staff laid off that we can't take care of a lot of it. So we agreed. The town staff went out and put them out, and the BIAs are going to water them and keep them themselves. And the town staff will help as much as they can. But was very clear to them that the town staff is not there this spring, and so both BIAs were very good. And they've stepped forward and said, yes, you get them out there and we'll take it. That's really just great to have that happening.
It is, yeah.
Anyone else? Not hearing anybody. I have no motions, no notice of motions, no bylaws. So we just have the announcement. The next regular council meeting will be held on Monday, June 15th, 2020 at 6 p.m. through electronic participation, unless notified otherwise. All committee and board meetings remain suspended until further notice, with the exception of the BIAs, both Blythe and Wingham, and they are held through electronic participation too. There is no other business. Closed session reporting out that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby proceed at 7:09 into an in-camera session closed to the public to discuss the following: personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, Director of Public Works and Facility Recruitment update. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
I have Rick. I'm going to hand it over to you, Carson. We have to do the recorded vote.
Thank you, Your Worship. So as Reeve Bailey indicated, this will be a recorded vote. So Councillor McBurney. Deputy Reeve Sight. Councillor Falconer.
Yes.
Councillor Heffer. Councillor Van Hitterson. Councillor Palmer.
Yes.
And Reeve Bailey.
Yes.
Okay, so that vote carries 7-0. So what I'll do right now is I'll end this meeting and then we'll log into the closed session meeting.